All right, everyone, welcome along. So what's job number one when it actually comes to saying it's time for us to do an upgrade and update what goes on within our Power BI semantic models? The first step is going to be to take a look at the schema. Now, how do we look at the schema of a Power BI file beyond just looking at what's in the PBIX, really? Now, what the PBIX will tell you is kind of these are the table structures. Potentially, we can even look and see the content of it. But what it doesn't tell us is the expense of any particular column. You know, is this a good column that we should have? Is it a bad column that we really shouldn't have? And all too often we see, especially at the moment, we're seeing people say, oh, you know, look, remove unused columns, do this, do that. Now, there is a value add in saying, yeah, you should only have in your Power BI semantic model information that you're going to use. But, you know, equally, potentially there's going to always be content in there that you're not really using today, but that potentially will be used in the future. So it's a bit of a difficult one to say, oh, we're just going to remove these things. Equally, if you're removing a column and it actually is taking up less than 1% of your semantic model, it is a pretty cheap column on it, you're not really adding any benefit to your life by removing it, okay? So what we should really do is have a look and see what this all means and how it goes. One lesson that I want you to be aware of, and this is something I was always taught when I was learning all these tools and things, and this is going way back to, you know, the 2000s, maybe even pre-millennium. Let's not even go that far. But one of the things that's really important to understand is it's very easy to add things to your model. Okay, so we always used to learn it in terms of we were talking about CMDBs, so configuration management databases. But it's very easy to add things to it. So if you need to add content to a report pack, we can add it. Okay, as long as it's either an existing dimension or a dimension that's tied to something, it's easy to add. What's very difficult and can often be nearly impossible to do is to remove stuff. Okay. Now, in terms of the way that a good Power BI environment is used and a good semantic model is used, I would always be really careful about removing columns just because I think no one's using them. I am not convinced that there are tools out there that really will tell you every single connected Excel spreadsheet, every single connected Power BI report, and what column sets they are calling within them. Okay? I am not 100% convinced of that. With that in mind, you want to design your semantic models to be as small as possible and remove as much noise as you can, but you want to make sure that your dimensions that you bring through really have the content that you need to properly evaluate them. A prime example would be like a product dimension, where you have product, category, subcategory would be a typical thing. You might even have a third subcategory type, you know, a subcategory. The likelihood is that you will predominantly use probably like product type and product, definitely. You might find that very few people, if any, are going to use subcategory. Does that mean that subcategory should be removed or subcategory should be removed? The likelihood is probably it doesn't, because it exists for a reason. Someone's made the request for a reason. It might be that in today's report environment, we're not using it, but the likelihood again is going to be, it'll be a small text column. It's not going to be really impacting too much, because by the time you put together the hierarchy, it is what it is. You know, so you're going to have to think through what you do. And especially to remove that, it means we then have to work out how that hierarchy fits at a different level. So you end up creating work for the sake of not really much gain. So have a think about it before we jump on board and say, let's just remove these, let's remove that. Let's go have a look at how we actually have a look at the Veripaq file, or the Vertipaq file, as it's called, okay, which is really fundamentally, it's the file that is your semantic model, or the schema information that is your semantic model. We can extract that, we can have a look and see exactly what's going on within our model. And then from there, we would typically say, let's plan the future for it. Now the boring bit. Geordie Intelligence is a YouTube channel. As such, we're completely dependent on our subscribers liking the posts. Those who won't subscribe, liking the posts. People in general, telling us what they like, what they don't like. So leave a comment. Simple thing, like, subscribe, add a comment saying, God, this is brilliant, or no, this is terrible. Either is just as important. Professionally, we've got Geordie Consulting, who works with clients of all sizes, from global enterprises to small businesses locally. Our aim is to work with our clients to maximize the value that their data gives to them and to help them achieve their visions of being a data-driven organization. If you decide you want to spend some time working with Geordie Consulting, get in touch. Send us an email at office@geordieconsulting.co.uk and we'll work with you to move your business data and your data management to the next level. So here we are, okay? This is our Jesmond Dean data, isn't it, that we're looking at. And I thought, well, let's have a look and see kind of what's going on with this in terms of, can we connect and get the data out from the cloud? Because more and more I'm hearing we're going to do this cloud-focused way of working. So let's have a look. So what I've done is I've gone to SQLBI.com, okay? SQLBI.com. Here, under Tools, you see we've got Vertipaq Analyser here, right? This is the one we're going to use, but to get the content that we need to download DAX Studio as well, okay? So I've already downloaded both of these to my computer, and what we're going to do is actually say, right, from here, how do I connect in DAX Studio to actually get the content that I need? So we're going to go to Connect, and we need to place some information into there. So where do we get that information? So step number one is going to be to come in your semantic model and have a look and see under settings, and you can see we've got server settings and we've got some information there, okay? We've got the connection string that we need. This is the connection string to the workspace, but this is ideal. This is just what we need to place into DAX Studio. So we're going to copy that, go back to DAX Studio, hit connect. It's already in, so I'm just going to click connect to it. It'll ask me my credentials, confirm them. I'm going to click, yep, this is me. It'll say which database or which semantic model do you want to connect to if you've got more than one within the workspace. So we're going to pick Jesmond Dean. Okay. From here, we've now connected to the online file. So we've opened our model, okay? We can see on the left-hand side, we've got information about the columns that we've got there, okay? We've got a big window in the middle where we can write DAX statements and evaluate them and test them. And then we've also got information in terms of a log, results if we've got any in history, okay? So let's start by doing a simple DAX equation, just to kind of prove to you that you can write DAX statements in here, okay? So we start, you have to write and evaluate. Okay, so we need to evaluate something. Now evaluate, it has to have a table to it, okay? So what we'll do is we'll do summarize. Need to give it a table, so we're going to summarize events, comma. This is going to be events, event. Let's bring in events, finishers. Now we can put in a calculate column or like kind of a proper DAX statement type column. Yeah, like you're more like doing a pivot table with this, so it's like a cross-tab query. Okay, so we're going to call that registered, and then that's going to be our registered finishers. Okay, and then finally we close the brackets and we can hit run. Okay, so hopefully at the bottom, we'll see, here we go, got a nice list showing us really what's happened, okay? And we can do some further things with this. So we could say, well, on here, we can say add columns to this, and that's going to be minus registered. Okay, so we can see, simple enough, goes through and it works, okay? This will help you really see what's going on, and you can use this to really evaluate steps as well within your measures. So when you're writing large variable sets, potentially you can do these tests to actually see, well, is that variable bringing back what we wanted? especially useful if you're doing large columns like this. Okay, so we've got this functionality that works for us. If you need to do and say, well, we want to evaluate something like a measure, for example, so we want to test something, and this is a measure that I know we need in our model because I know it's not there. We zoom in again so you can see. Okay, what you need to do, or a simple thing, is if you put the curly braces in, that says it's a record, because remember, it needs a table. So if it's going to be a record of a scalar value, it makes it work with the table function that is, or the table expectations that are elevated. So what we can do is, let's say this, so we go average x, okay? We're going to average x the events by registered finishes. Okay, so what this is actually going to give us is what's the average number of finishes that we get for any event. So we hit enter on that. Let's zoom out again. We can zoom in again down here, and we can see it's 179. Okay, and you say, oh, it's terrible, we need it to be something else. You can do format things on it as well. But what we've got here is this is how we could test a measure that we want to write. So I know we need the average number of finishes that we have. Here's the measure that we need for it. Okay. What we can do as well within DAX Studio, and the most important part really, is actually we can start to look under the advanced area. Now we can choose to say, well, we want to view the metrics here. Okay. And click OK, and it will show us some of the information that would be exported out into a VPAX file. Okay, saying some because it's only some. The most important bit is missing, which is all the DAX statements. So what we would do for that is we would turn around and we'd use this one up here next to it, this export the metrics. If we're going to click export the metrics, it'll say, where do you want to export them to? I'm going to click save, just replace it because it, had a copy there already, of course, okay? And that's going to place that down somewhere where I can use it. The next step I need to do is to go to Vertipaq Analyser, which I've downloaded and copied the resulting spreadsheet somewhere else. So here we are, okay? I've got this file. First thing you've got to do, okay? When you get the file and place it somewhere, right click, go to properties, okay? There's a little tick box that you need to check, okay? Because of what this is and because of what it contains, you need to click to unblock it, okay? You need to basically say, I trust the code that's within it. So there's a bit of element of trust in there. This is one of those things, you do need to trust them. Click OK. Then what we can do is we can open Vertipaq Analyser. So here's Vertipaq Analyser. You can see it's saying we've got a security warning on the top. It's the first time I've opened it on here. We're going to say enable the content. Where you know the Vertipaq's in and working is that you basically have an extra tab here, third from the left, sorry, okay? Vertipaq Analyser. If you click on it, it'll say open a VPAX. You also have the ability of formatting your DAX expressions. So what you can do is you can use that to format the DAX to then place back into it, to your PBIX file. It's not as intuitive as some of them. Tabular editor allows you to do it in place. So you can kind of open the measures, reformat them, and it'll upload them back. So it's a two-step process, but even being able to just format them can make it easier to read the content of it. So what we do is we go to open VPAX. So here we go. My Vertipaq Analyser file has opened, or my VPAX file has been opened within Vertipaq Analyser. Let me see, can we zoom in? Yeah, we can, can't we? Okay. And we can see some information about it. So we've got some total size. We can see there's 11 tables, there's 11 partitions, because this was a basic one built from spreadsheets. So the tables aren't partitioned. If you had large fact tables that were coming from databases or from other sources, you may find you're able to partition that data. There's a whole host of things to be aware of when you start to use partition data as well. But if you're doing that, you should presumably already be aware of that, or somebody in your organization should be aware of that. We can see we've got no calculated tables. We can see we've got some calculated columns. We can see calculated items, roles, and auto date tables. So we're fine. So our auto date tables are turned off, and that's where, when you're in Power BI desktop, go to the add remove to the options and settings, sorry, you can turn on and turn off auto date time. Make sure it's turned off if you're going to do anything and say you're any level of competent developer. Okay, got our summary there. We can now look and see the table information, so we can see information about the tables that we've got. Now, okay, and we can see from our tables, we can see the cardinality, so actually how common is the data that's in there, or actually what's going on. See the size of the tables, we can see column sizes, all sorts of information about that table. We can also see, and this is one of the most important areas, we see things like the database size. So on your database, based on how big your Power BI model is, or your semantic model is, how much of it is actually made up of that particular table. Now, 9 times out of 10, those tables should be your fact tables. So in here, we can see we've got 2 areas here where it's participation and people. Now, participation is our main table for the fact information. So that's our fact table. That's only 34%, okay? Whereas our people table is nearly 52%. So there's definitely something going on with it. I know what it is, and it's to do with how people are stored, and that people also has within it calculated columns. And I've put calculated columns in just because, in particular, things like the consecutive events, the overall consecutive events, it might be quicker to do it that way than to calculate consecutive events at the time of execution. So there's a kind of there's an issue with that for it, but definitely it's something to keep an eye on. That's definitely a bit of a concern, that the table that effectively is the dimension table for people is bigger than the whole fact table for their participation in the events. So there's some things we need to look at that. So there will definitely be some expensive columns within it. So we can have a look at that later. We've got our columns overall, which again just tells us a breakdown of all those tables within it. And we can see, no big surprise, the 2 most expensive columns are the link columns. Now, potentially those are the same, so we can get rid of one from the other. So we should probably get rid of the participation link column, but we can double check and make sure it is the same. I'm pretty sure it is the same, and it's just been left there as an inefficiency. Having the link there, though, is useful because it allows you to actually go and view somebody's parkrun page. But potentially we could make those dynamic, maybe. That might be a way to go, so that the table it appears in builds it at the time. So we'll have a look and see. There's ways of doing that. Again, those are things to check. We can go down and we can see what else we would need to do. But in theory, if we fixed these 2 alone, that would drop our total database size down by 37%, nearly 38%. Now, for this report that we've built, which is under 5 megabytes, that's not going to be like a big whoop, is it? Okay, in terms of the actual PBIX file size, it's 2 megabytes. So losing 38% isn't necessarily an issue. But when you see things like this in a data model, I can guarantee you'll see things like this in your enterprise model that your company is using. And if you're saying, well, we want to use Power BI Pro subscriptions, and you need to keep your model size down below 1 gigabyte, you will definitely look and see, hang on, what does that column do? What's happening? So this one where we've got a clear duplication is definitely something we should be looking to remove. Okay. It's interesting to know one thing that you've got here. So if you were looking and we saw, well, people's really high on the table side, there's a twisty there. So you can actually drop down and see how does that break down. So we can see, yeah, link is the one, it's 35% of it. We've got participant, which is, what is participant? Oh, it's the name. Okay, so it's a text column. So no big surprises, a text column is big, okay? Text takes up more space than numbers, so text column's big. Parkrun ID, which effectively would contain like as unique data as that, is 17. So you can see, it's about 10% difference in terms of two columns that should both have similar cardinality. And in fact, if we went over to the left, we should see that, they've got, very similar cardinality, but one is 10% cheaper or smaller than the other. Okay, so things like that, it's worth noting. Overall, definitely link is a column that we should look to try and tidy that down one way or the other. Either remove one of them or try and make it so that we've got something, a measure that will just derive it based on the Parkrun ID, which is all it is based on. It should just be a case of concatenating two strings, shouldn't it? We can do that quite easily. So we'll have a look at that. We'll piece those together. Partitions, obviously we don't have any. We've just got one for each one. User hierarchies, we don't have any hierarchies in here. The relationship information, so actually how expensive is this relationship? Are relationships efficient within your organization? How much they used? What's the ratio of like their one to many side of it? Okay, these are very useful screens to go through when you are coming through and saying, right, we need to do periodic updates to our models. You got your compression, so actually how well are we compressing our things, our columns, sorry, and then we've got obviously our column types. What column types do we have? And then we get into what's really useful here, the DAX expressions in particular, okay? This is really one of the most important areas that we have within here. If we zoom in on this, I should have zoomed in, shouldn't I? If I zoom in on this, you can see here are the information sets that we've got. These are how these measures are written. Okay, so one of the things that you do when you say, well, we need to document our Power BI report packs is we're going to get all the measures written down somewhere. Export the Vertipaq Analyser file. Does it? The gotcha is you are limited by how much you can really put in an Excel cell. So if people have put War and Peace, or you've got really, really large measures where, I mean, I've written some humdingers that are long and big and complicated. And we do need to then tweak those and review those. But we've had to specifically call them out and have them recorded somewhere else other than VPACs because they're just too big to fit into here. Okay, you've got descriptions. So descriptions are useful to write because then they're separate to being in the measure and the DAX expression. I know people say put lots of comments in. Potentially you can, but if that's going to make it too big to fit in here, maybe description's the one to use. So we can have a look at where to update and add the descriptions into these things. What we can do though, as I say, we can say, let's format these DAX expressions. We're going to go, I just found the code, excellent, okay. Okay, so it's going to format these DAX expressions into something that's far more usable. We can see we've got some here where like this is our dump filters measure, which is really useful to have the dump filters, which allows us to actually see what filters are applied. But you can see I've gone through and limited a bit of it in terms of what it's actually looking at based on the filters that are going to be there. Okay, we've got all sorts of measures in here, many of which we can review and we can remove. Some of them I'm sure we definitely will remove, some of the consecutive pieces that we've gone through. We do need to tweak some of the consecutives as well, but it's nice to be able to see what's happening with them. We're also going to look at how can we restructure this and actually place them into more display folders to make it easier. So job number one, when we say it's time to plan an upgrade, is always going to be the same. We need to look through and understand what the DAX measures are that we've got going through, as well as understanding what the challenges are that we're facing. So for us, we've got a couple of things that we do need to deal with. So the first one is one that largely we haven't dealt with for a long time, and that's purely because it was part of what was initially required as we were building it. So when I was first building this to give some level of comparison and do stuff, we were looking at what was just the latest results data, which is a different, potentially different data source as far as concerned. We kept it separate from the event histories. The plan had always been to at some point remove it, but day one, I didn't want to just do it in case we had other legacy measures that were using it. Now it's actually built based on the participation table. So what we're doing is building the events, and then we're saying, right, let's spit out the latest results, which is kind of where event is max. So we know that it's the same as the others. So it is just kind of a legacy table. It's one we can definitely get rid of. So we need to mark that as our job number one, don't we? We're going to remove the latest results table. Okay. Got some other things that we've put in here in terms of that we've got the secondary. The other piece that we've got is one I've been mulling over and trying to work out what the right thing to do is with it. Okay. Now I love this topic because this is something that's really, it hits home and is really clear as to what actually goes on when we do progress data analytics projects from being, well, it's just a spreadsheet to, well, now we've got this whole thing. And that's the run and volunteer membership. Okay. Now, Parkrun has there's a policy or a policy, okay, where if you do more than a set number of runs or you volunteer more than a set number of times, you get into a volunteer club or a running club, as it were. Okay, so it's kind of like a badge of honor. You know, I've done this many things, I've done that many things. Now the question is, it'd be great to be able to track over time people's progress across that. The reality is we actually can't. Okay, so it kind of makes it difficult. The way this works is every time we get, we're copying the data from the run history, is we get the information as to what club they're in at the time that the run, that the export is that we copy and paste the table. Now the challenge with this is that it means that when we do a periodic refresh or when we build in whole new things, we're effectively resetting the clock for everyone. So we can't really get that history to say, well, on this date, you've done this many things. We can't, we get how many partners have done overall, but that's again from that point in time. So what it kind of means is, well, my original hope would be we could kind of do this, but it still works. But then it gets to the whole point of saying, well, what should we actually do? So the milestones that people are in, I'm covering a bit of the running milestone one. You can kind of see it there. But it's nice to be able to see what percentage people are, what percentage of your field are in which ones. But again, it's always based on kind of the latest appearance they have at the event. So for us in Judgment Dean, it's kind of like the last time they've come through. So we kind of get a few things going on with that. But the way I've kind of ended up thinking about it is, well, it's probably good to see and it's fine. But then we get to this point where we've got kind of the finish time based on run membership. Now, again, is this going the right way? Because what we're doing is at the moment, we're duplicating lots of runs. So me, for example, I've done 30 plus runs at Judgment Dean. So I will appear in both of these charts on like this one here and this one at least 30 times. Okay, because so many times I've done it or run it. The volunteering one is different because that's running actually as well, so it's 30 times. So we've got this point, haven't we? We're saying, like, does that make sense? And I've kind of ummed and ahed about it. Then I was thinking, well, do we do the averages? But then is that right? And I think this is one of those things where we need to be really clear and understand that this is a conversation that we're able to have as a result of the upgrades of data analytics. Now, there's a word for that, okay? And it's something that I see an awful lot in the work that we do as a consultancy and the work that we go through with our clients. And this is emergence. Okay? So there'd be no way that we could really build this chart, or we could build this chart based on, well, we've got one event. So here's one event, this is the split of people. But it would be kind of a bit, like, I don't understand, that doesn't really make much sense. We can kind of simulate that, can't we? Because what we can do is we can use our filters. We can say, right, let's actually change this. Let's bring in events. This is one of the benefits of the platform like Power BI is we can quickly say, well, let's just check this. Let's switch that to be a basic filter, so we can just pick an event. Just pick this one at random. Okay, I think you can see, like, there is a lot less value from that than what we got from the more bell curve nature of it, which is, I think, that was where I wanted to get to. That's why don't really want to do the averages. I think the bell curve is nice because it shows us, and we've got all three charts here in a bell curve. So again, your finishes by age category, and again, that's difficult because we need to validate, does that change over time? I'm pretty sure that doesn't. I think that one does stay, but I'll double check with my older runs and just box take that exercise. But again, what we're suddenly realizing is we've got, yes, we do have that hard requirement in our organization to say, right, we're going to remove latest results, which is here. Yeah, we're going to remove this table, so that'll be gone. There are ways that you could do that and choose to go around doing it. You could do like a scream test, which wouldn't break anybody's reports, but would prevent them doing new stuff, which is where you hide the whole table and see if anyone screams at you in a month. Okay, so they're not doing new stuff. But if people are using it, they will still be able to use it. So you won't be getting that information out. You could do what we're going to do and just delete it. And that's kind of where there's issues. This is definitely something, though, that, again, going back to Vertipaq, potentially we're saying, well, we're going to remove this. And this is a reason partly why we haven't done it so far, is that as we look along the row of here, and we look at the table size, see it's less than 4% of the total size of our model. So it's not one that's really taking up a huge amount of space, as it were, or a lot of resources. The interesting to remember is this is taking up 4%. The participation table that covers everything is taking up 35%. Okay, so we can see that individual table is actually really expensive, and you're getting that. It's that economies of scale benefit that the compression algorithms can work much better because there are more rows, which is why Power BI is columnar, and we look to work on columns. So that's a really great example, I think, of seeing it. The other thing that we've got going on is, because I plan to see where we can have tracking, is that both run membership and volunteer membership are related to participation, because we think, well, let's be that. But really what we should do is link it into people, because we just have, well, what's your latest Run Club membership when we've extracted the data. So I think that's probably the right thing to do. So what I'll do is I will tweak those, but we get to that point. Suddenly we're seeing, aren't we? It's not just about saying, I'm just going to look at DAX expressions and see, well, how can I tweak these DAX expressions? What do I need to change? What do we need to add? Do the sensible thing, like actually implement proper display folders. When we first did this, display folders weren't really a thing. I think they were coming through in, I think it was early release. Wasn't fully sure as to what they were going to do, but we should put these into display folders. But again, display folders, what kind of display folder should we use? What's the right thing to do with this? There's so many things that you get into and you go, oh, what do we need to do? Do we need any calculated items to add in? Should we be putting in calculation groups? Should we be putting in field parameters? All these are questions that Vertipaq will help you with. And that's really something we have to understand. So we know for us, we need to make sure, because we've put in the secondary, which is fine. That'd be job one, make sure there's a secondary table for your secondary measures. We need to make sure that in this case, we're going to remove our latest results table. And then step 3 is going to be that we're going to reevaluate the membership for both club and for run and volunteer membership, make sure it's against people, and also make sure then that all the measures we calculate and work. So we've got kind of our 3 additional things that we're going to do on our core model, that these would be just part of our incremental improvement strategies. So we can see this is our improvements. We then look at what our requests are for, oh, can we do this? Like, we want to be able to have a consistent. So what do you reckon then? Being able to look and see what's happening within a model is vital, okay? One thing that we would always recommend is when you publish your updates to your semantic model, take the VPACs, okay? Because at some point you're going to do and say, well, we're going to do an update to the model, and then take the VPACs. Compare the two. Are the two aligned? Do the two still meet? Okay, because what you might find is something that you built on day one. Right? We saw the really expensive columns. That might have changed. So something might be going on within your model, okay? Hopefully it won't, and you'll still have the same percentages in terms of this is still roughly this percentage size of the model. But you'll find, depending on how the model goes or what changes within it, especially as a fact table grows, that might well change. But have a look and be sure to compare both. Because if you get there and you go, well, this one has 20 measures, this one has 500, someone's been updating your model without telling you, okay? Not necessarily a bad thing, but it's worth being aware of and tracking. Because if you're just going to say, well, we're going to plan our updates based on what we delivered and what's currently in use has changed, you're going to find there might be all sorts of other things that you just got wrong with it. So you need to be aware, see the difference, see what's changed, see also what's going on with everything. Okay. I hope you enjoyed that. As I say, don't forget, leave a comment down below. Let us know what you think. Is Vertipaq Analyser something you're going to use? Can you see why we recommend it and why we say spend some time going through and actually understanding it? With all that said, stay safe, take care, ta-da.